Let's try that again. I think I might have been muted. I'm not sure. So, hello, hello, and welcome. I am Lisa Marker Robbins, founder and CEO of Leap, and we are going to look at what we can learn from PSAT score reports today to help it guide your college-bound family on. I know this can be a very overwhelming journey, and we want to make sense of data to help point us in the right direction. So this is not one of our longer webinars, but I'm going to stay on till I get all of your questions answered today. So if you have them, everybody look at your screen, find where, I feel like this lighting is weird in here. I'm looking like even my face is looking pink. Find where that question mark is, go to that, and then I want you to go ahead and pull that up. Sometimes I'm going to ask you to contribute some ideas or answer some questions that I might have by replying in there. But at any time during our webinar today, you can go ahead and drop in a question that you want me to answer, and then we'll definitely do a Q&A at the end because I want to get you resourced with important information. This is an important event and you carved time out of your very busy family. So do as I did, turn your phone to silent and put it face down so it's not a distraction so we can make every minute together count. So you're going to walk away today with 4 actions that you can take from PSAT score reports. Tell me if you can go down to that question feature. I want to know, do you have a 10th grader, 11th grader, or some other grade? Let me know in the question feature. So just go ahead and drop in. We've got a 10th grader. It's always great to get a 10th grade score. Oh, I've got lots of 10th graders. Okay. Nancy's got an 11th grader. There's something for everyone. Okay. Sarah's also got an 11th grader. Great. So it looks like we've got a mix of 10th and 11th. And as I predicted, we do not have anybody younger and we don't have anybody older. I mean, seriously, those seniors have already applied to college. That's where you guys are going to be a year from now. Can you believe it? Applications submitted, enjoying senior year. For those of you with 11th graders, 10th graders, it's going to be here before you know it. Okay. Thanks for letting me know how old your kiddos are. Is anybody on whose child did not take a PSAT, but you just want to learn more about this? Just say me in the question feature. So sometimes we have people that are like, somehow I think I missed out on this PSAT and I need to learn about it. So the rest of you, I'm going to assume that your student has access to, and you've already looked at their score report, and we're gonna reference that today. We're gonna talk about that today. And Julie also has an 8th grader. I bet you some other of you have younger ones. The PSAT is changing in the fall, so we're gonna talk about that as well. So like Julie, you've got, I missed how old, you've got a 10th grader and an 8th grader. What your 10th grader will take next year and what your 8th grader will take when they're in high school is very, very different from the PSAT as it has existed up until October of 2022. So I'm going to walk you all through that change that's coming as well. It also affects the SAT. So we're going to talk about that. It's something that we at LEAP are spending a lot of time investigating and educating ourselves on so that we can help our families. Okay. So I'm going to put this face away because you guys are not here to see me. You are here to get information and get your questions answered. I will come back on face to camera when we do the Q&A, but do not hesitate throughout to go ahead and drop those questions in, because sometimes your questions catch my attention while we're doing that. And while I'm on a slide, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to answer that one real quick while we go. So don't hesitate to do that. That does not bother me at all. Okay, let's get that turned off. Perfect. And let's go ahead. I've got your questions up and let's go ahead and dive right in. So what was that test that your kiddos took? Well, it is a pre-SAT. It tests the exact same skills as the SAT. And we're going to talk about what those skills are, but it also has another purpose. So looks like we got a little spacing issue there, but it's the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. So you ever hear in the news, so-and-so is a National Merit semifinalist or finalist, and there can be big scholarships that go along with that. I'm going to let you guys know about how that works here in just a little bit. But when you hear that the news, to qualify as a National Merit semifinalist or eventually a finalist, the very first step is having a strong PSAT score. That is the first qualifier for national merit. Okay, so this test is practice for the SAT, and it is the qualifying exam for the National Merit Scholarship competition, is really what it is. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. Now, why do we at LEAP advise students to take the PSAT? And I'm going to tell you, I don't advise everybody to take it. I'll tell you on the next slide who I advise to take it. So it is terrific practice. You know, I spoke at Mason High School today to their College 101 class. And as we were talking about this, you know, I asked the kids, how often do you guys have to take a test that's 3 hours long? Never. Absolutely never. And so the PSAT given in 10th grade and early 11th grade is really fantastic practice for your students, okay? So we've got to build that muscle. You know, a marathon runner doesn't just go out and run 26 point whatever miles it is. I would not know because I am not a runner. If you ever see me running, you should also run because something not good is behind me. So we need to build up that endurance muscle. You know, the marathon runner gets out there and they do short runs and long runs and preparation, but you can't just dive right into something that's really long. And so there's no other time that our students have where they're taking these tests except for PSAT, pre-ACT, ACT, and SAT. That's about it in high school. One of the kids today raised their hand and said, well, my APUSH exam, and I said, no, it was not over 3 hours. It probably felt like it, and that's because our kids are not used to it, okay? So PSAT is terrific practice. It doesn't count for, you know, getting into college, right? It also can help guide you, and we're going to look at this, on should your student be taking the ACT or the SAT. You know, when we as parents were in high school, and I'm a little bit older than most of you, but when we as parents were in high school, I remember I was in high school in the 80s, there were regional preferences and actually requirements. So I grew up here in Cincinnati, and we just took the ACT. We really didn't take the SAT. A lot of the colleges in our area required the ACT. In the Northeast, I see Nancy, you're joining us today. You did PSAT, your daughter did PSAT prep with us. You're in New York. You know, up in New York, they are an SAT state historically. However, as of 2005, all colleges take the ACT and the SAT on equal footing. So don't let your regional preferences, you know, Ohioans tend to take the ACT over the SAT, and those in the Northeast, those on the West Coast tend to take the SAT. But you might just discover by your student taking the PSAT that they are better suited for one or the other. Since all colleges take either, it's best to just test to your strength. This can also help us guide future course selection for your teen. And as I mentioned already, it doubles as a national merit qualification test, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. Okay, so I said I don't recommend that everybody takes it. So who should take it? It isn't a necessary test, although as I just told you, it is a beneficial test. So no colleges will receive these scores. Even for those of you whose student perhaps might be a national merit qualifier, nobody will ever know their exact score. They will only know they had a score high enough for qualification. We really like to see high achieving 10th and 11th graders take it because of this National Merit Scholarship. The National Merit Scholarship, depending on your choice of colleges, can offer a tiny bit of money or at some schools, it's a full ride, including room and board and a laptop and a study abroad. So that can be a huge benefit financially if you're looking to maximize merit scholarships and lower your out-of-pocket cost of college. My oldest had a full tuition scholarship, not based on PSAT, but based on ACT and GPA. And I'll tell you what, I was thankful for every penny that I saved. I also like anybody who wants to use it as an SAT baseline. Here at LEAP, we do have a diagnostic SAT that students can take in lieu of a PSAT. So that PSAT, it's only given on one date a year. It is given every October and on the second or third Wednesday, depending on how the calendar falls. And so if you miss the boat on that, that ship has sailed. However, you can do a diagnostic SAT, and at LEAP, we offer those for free. So I like the high achieving students to do it so that we can identify those who have potential for those very lucrative scholarships through national merit and colleges who offer good scholarships to high scoring students. Now, as I already mentioned, the PSAT as it exists currently will never again be seen. Here, let me tell you what's going to stay the same and what's going to change. So the PSAT will change in October of 2023. The SAT is changing in March of 2024. So if you have a student, so 10th grade families, you are the class of 2025, 10th grade families and younger, class of 2025, your students will really never take the SAT or PSAT on paper. The test is moving to 100% digital. It will also be shorter because it's now going to be what we call an adaptive test. So based upon how your student is answering the questions, they will be fed different questions as far as difficulty and content. And when they get to a certain score, some students are going to finish quicker than others. So there won't be a standard length for the test. The test of two students sitting next to each other is going to vary. Here's the deal though. College Board has not given us a lot of information about this yet. We at LEAP belong to the National Test Prep Association. We attend all their professional development, and we are tight colleagues with other test prep providers from all over the country. So we are all studying this and learning this together and going to make available to families the best that we can. But we don't have a crystal ball, and College Board has not given us a lot yet. So if your student struggles with online testing, this is something to be aware of. Now, what's not going to change are those same concepts that are going to be tested. So grammar, reading, math on the PSAT through geometry, on the SAT through algebra 2, reading of tables, charts, and graphs, vocabulary. What is tested, the content that colleges want students to be strong on, doesn't change. So the concepts will be the same, and they are the same as what is tested on the ACT. So I want you all to remember that these tests are achievement tests. Many moons ago, many decades ago, the SAT was really more of an aptitude test. Now it's an achievement test. So it is measuring what your students have learned in school. And then the test prep side of this is about strategies and practice and pacing, but it's going to look different in the future. So if you've got questions about how the test is going to change or what this means, don't hesitate to drop them in. I will answer what I'm able to. And just know that we are continuing to keep our fingers on the pulse of this change. We get professional development on it monthly, and we will be is going to be guiding us. Okay. Now, the PSAT, like I said, is based off the SAT, only slightly easier. The PSAT is designed for a student who has completed their sophomore year. So parents of sophomores that we're on, that's about half of you that are on today. You're naturally going to see your students get a little bit of a bump in their score next fall. Let's even say the test remained 100% the same. It was pencil to paper and everything else was the same. It was a standard length, which none of that's true, but let's just pretend like that is, sophomore parents. Your students would get a slight bump just because, hey, they've achieved more content in school. However, the SAT is going to be slightly harder because it elevates up to Algebra 2. So the PSAT is 2 hours, 45 minutes long. The SAT is 3 hours long as they stand now. Like I said, that PSAT next fall is going to be shorter, but it's going to vary by student. It will still have 2 sections. So evidence-based reading is truly the reading portion of the test, reading comprehension, vocabulary. Writing is not physically writing anything. It is multiple choice questions, testing grammar, rhetorical skills, knowledge of language. And then there's math. Your students took a math test that had a no calculator section on it. That is going away in the fall. Calculators will be able to be used on the math section on the new on all math questions on the new PSAT and the new SAT that will be coming out. So that will be a relief to your kids, even though we've always told them, hey, that really isn't a big deal. But calculator, they can bring their own calculator, or there will be one on the screen that they can use. That one can be a little bit wonky to get adjusted to, so we suggest that students still always bring a calculator. On the PSAT, if you're looking at your student score report now, we're going to start talking about that in a minute, 1520 is a perfect score. Perfect SAT is 1600. College Board has created this scoring so that if your student received an 1120 on the PSAT, they would be predicted to get an SAT of an 1120. So it's not like, oh, I got an 1120 and there's an 80-point difference on this scale, so, oh, that's going to be a 1200. No, that is not true. An 1120 on the PSAT is equal to an 1120 on the SAT, okay? So it has already been worked into their scale, into their concordance. Now let's take a bit of a look at the score report. So everybody has this on the main score. Now, there are paper reports that some schools still give out to their students, some don't. And everybody, even if your school gave you a paper score report, I want everybody to be sure that you are logging in at some point in the future to psat.org/myscore. Why? Because there are additional details beyond what your score report has for your student, and you gain insights that will help even better direct some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So that deeper scores and skill breakdown is available online. So when you see this, for instance, this section, your score today. So this student got a total score of a 960. The range, 320 to 1520. It's also telling you the student's percentile score as compared to all students who tested on that day. Remember, this is your predictive SAT score as well. I want you to keep that in mind because this is what's helping guide us between ACT and SAT. Now, how we get to that 960, that's a total score, is there's a reading and writing score that's going to be between 160 and 760, a math score on the same scale. You add those together to get your total score. That's where we get up to the 1520. So there are section scores and you've got your total score. So Keep that in mind on these section scores. You really want to pay attention to section scores because it's telling you where your students have strength and challenges, opportunities. As we look at this then, so that was the total score, right? So that you've got this, that's your total score. Now let's hop forward. Then you've got for both math and evidence-based reading and writing, you've got this. So number one, this 560, that was the student score on just what we would say is the English portions of the test. They are taking this scale score and giving you, this is a scaled score. So it's taking your raw score and converting it to a scale score. Right below that, it gives you your percentile. So this student at a 560 is in the 80th percentile, top 20% of all test takers on the English portion of this test. So something to keep in mind. The same student, was in a 51st percentile on their total score. Now, this number 3 there is, in ACT has this as well. There's something called college and career readiness benchmarks. So these benchmarks are telling you the likelihood that your student would receive a C or better in a college course in the same subject. So in a college level English course, if you're in the green, which a 560 is, if you're in the green, it's saying this student is exceeding the benchmark and looks to be on par for being successful in college. In this case, the benchmark is 460. If you're in the yellow, you're almost there. And frankly, that yellow zone is so small that it could easily, depending on a good day or a bad day testing, it could go up or it could go down. And then if it's in the red, it's saying your student either struggled with this type of a test. So I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that your student has gaps if they're in the red, okay? If they miss the college readiness benchmarks on the ACT and the PSAT, do you have gaps? Going to be more likely. My oldest, I've got 3 kids. My oldest was only testing around average on the PSAT and SAT every time he took them. On the ACT, that kid was in the 99th percentile. He was gifted in math, had ADHD. So for him, the nature of the PSAT test just didn't work for him. But he did very, very well on the ACT. So don't jump to a conclusion that if they're in the red, you've got a big problem. Investigate. When we see something like that, inspect why this might be. Compare it to their grades, talk to their teachers. Grade inflation is real. And so teachers are easily handing out A's right now. I'm not picking on anybody's school, and it might be less true in your school and more true in another school, but there is study after study right now. And for any of you that are listeners of my podcast, which is College and Career Clarity, I had in the fall Brian Eufinger, who is a test prep professional from the Atlanta area, on to talk about studies and data around grade inflation. So sometimes because of grade inflation, students are getting A's and B's, but they might be in the red. However, your student also could be in the red, but doing very well in school. And this just they're not a good test taker, or there were issues on this particular test. So if you're in the red, my advice to you is inspect, talk, discover, and then if you do find that there are gaps, then I would get tutoring, go in for, whether it's with LEAP or someone else, whether your student's going in after school to work one-on-one with their teacher, get help to close up those gaps, because they're going to need those skills to be successful in college, which is why we call this college and career readiness benchmark. So that's how you read that. ACT also has the college readiness benchmarks. For those of you that are on with me live today, January the 10th, while we're recording this, and I know some people are going to watch it afterwards, I have a guest on the podcast next Tuesday from ACT, and Rose Babington talks about the fact that ACT scores are at a 30-year low and grade inflation is real. And she gives you some information on college readiness benchmarks and great advice for your students. So that is how we read this portion. So you've got one that looks like this, and then your math, you're going to read the exact same way. Scale score, percentile score, college readiness benchmark. Next up, questions overview. So I highlighted here for you the green where it says omitted answers. Why did I do that? So this questions overview is telling you the total number. This is getting you to that raw score. So over here, you had the scale score. Here you had the raw score. How many right out of how many questions, right? So on the reading question, this reading questions, which now we're really breaking it down into reading and writing, right? And the math into calculator, no calculator. On the new PSAT come October, that math will not have a no calculator section. Keep it in mind. Your student, and this is be sure your students know this, going into the ACT, SAT, PSAT, you're never penalized for answering correctly. You used to be, but you now currently are not penalized for just guessing. There is no reason why your student should ever omit an answer. This student missed 4 raw points because they left something blank. There is no reason to do that because they might just guess correctly and pick up another point or 2. So be sure your kids know that as they go into their ACT testing, their SAT testing. Sometimes students don't know that. If they're running out of time, just fill it in going down and get every last point that you can get. So we've looked at what these sections are. Let's do a little bit deeper dive on what skills are being assessed. So on the reading, they're going to have a variety of passages, and it's going to include some graphics, and then they have to answer these questions. Now, let me say something about this. The new digital SAT and PSAT are going to only have really short passages. They're going to shorten up the passages, so your non-readers might like that a little bit better. You'll find and use evidence to answer the questions. So that's why it's called evidence-based reading. That really means that your students have to use higher level critical thinking skills, okay? So they're gonna have to be able to apply what they read. They are going to be, from what I've seen on the new PSAT and SAT, there's gonna be a bit of a greater emphasis on vocabulary, a return to that. You know, I started LEAP, it'll be 24 years ago in February. So we're getting ready to enter our 25th year, quarter of a century. I can hardly believe it. And the SAT has greatly been revised now 3 times in the 25 years that I've been doing this. There was a greater emphasis on vocabulary, then they moved away from it. Now they're going back to it. The way your student builds their reading skills is their vocabulary skills is to read, okay? And this is really going to require higher level reading skills. One difference between the PSAT and SAT versus the ACT is the reading level is more challenging. It's a higher level reading. We will see if that remains the same. Just because those reading passages are going to be shorter doesn't mean that they're not going to be more complex. So that's one thing to know. Okay, writing and language. They're reading passages and locating and fixing grammar errors. Grammar is heavily emphasized here. And they're asked to make selections that would improve the content and development of the passages that they're reading. So, you know, would we replace this underlined section with something else? On the math, they've got calculator and non-calculator, multiple choice and grid ends, and algebra 1 and geometry, as well as pre-algebra concepts. And they're doing more real-world problem solving. So there's a lot of reading on the math test, lots of story type problems, and kids a lot of times don't like that, but there's a fair amount of reading there. So that's the skills that are assessed. I would say the math on the PSAT, SAT is heavier on the reading than the ACT is, but the types of math questions are a little harder on the ACT. Now, with every test that you take, this is why I really, really, really want to emphasize everybody, please log into the online information to look at this. Because, you know, I said this is great practice for the SAT, and frankly, this is great practice for the ACT as well. I want students to learn from their mistakes. It doesn't mean a whole lot if we just have a number and we don't do anything from it. You know, at LEAP, with our ACT, SAT prep course, with our test prep tutoring, we use the LEAP Lens reports so that students have deep, deep, deep insights into what they got right, what they got wrong, the why behind it, and how to do better. So when you look at your PSAT report, you're going to see this. You've got the question number, the correct answer, a check mark if you answered it correctly, in red if you got it wrong, and that tells you what the right answer is, and it tells you the level of difficulty for the question. So that's the first thing. You can start to scan and go, oh, I'm missing this type of question, but that's not enough. What you really need to do, and you have to do this online, is you need to look at the questions. So for instance, question number 1, a sample here. If you go online, your student is able to access the actual question. They're able to see the question difficulty, see what the answer is, and why that answer is correct. So what I want your student to look at is when they go through, in this case, going back, the student should go through and everything that's read, they should access online, view the question, the correct answer, and read the explanation. Why? Because then they know, like, oh man, I made a dumb mistake. I moved too quickly. Do your students ever just try to like breeze through things? You know, one of my kids, my boy twin, Caleb, he just wanted to get it done all the time. Finished was his ideal. Didn't care if it was great when it came to his schoolwork. He just wanted to get finished with it. And he would rush through. But by sitting down and seeing the why behind the answers, Caleb frequently was making mistakes where it was just, he was in a hurry. Where Sydney, very diligent with her schoolwork, his twin, she would take her answer or take her time. And so she wasn't making careless mistakes. It was usually a sign that she didn't understand content. So you're looking to see if I would have taken my time, could have answered this correctly? Or is this the question that if they gave me an hour to answer this question, I still wouldn't know how to answer it? If that's the case, then really read the explanation. If it still doesn't make sense to your student, and this is what we do in tutoring at LEAP, then we look at the why behind it. We look at what is that concept? What gap do you have that we have to fill so you can do better next time? So a score report alone does not tell you everything you need to know. Even if your student is going to be taking the ACT and not the SAT, remember, these two tests are testing the same content, just in a slightly different way. So it can still help your student to go through and view the answers and the explanations, okay? Another use, besides all the great things that we learn about how we're performing on the test, is predicting AP potential. So PSAT has this is only on the online. So if you go in and you see across the screen there, student score reports, you got to navigate over to AP potential. This gives your student, and it lists all of the AP courses, and this gives your student a predictive with these shaded in by green, these radial dials. They might have changed the colors this year. I have no idea. I haven't logged in recently, but they circle this in and they say you have a low, medium, or high potential of scoring a 3, a 4, or a 5 on the AP exam. It will then tell you if that course is, if they're aware that this course is currently offered at your high school. Okay, so you're looking for some. Why do I like this? You guys are getting ready to work on scheduling courses. In just a couple weeks, I have a podcast episode coming up on my College and Career Clarity podcast where I have a guest. She's one of the LEAP counselors with our team, Julie Spack, and we are discussing advice for picking the right courses. Some of your students are risk averse and they don't want a chance not getting an A, and they play it safe and take the college prep instead of the AP. Years ago, I had a student who didn't get into a college that statistically, if you just looked at his ACT and his GPA, you would have thought he was going to get in. And when he didn't get in and his school counselor contacted his college that he wanted to get into, and they questioned why, because it felt like an outlier to them, they went ahead and said it's because he didn't challenge himself. He had a 4.0, but he never took an honors or an AP class. He took all college prep. Many colleges value rigor. They look at not only your student's GPA, but the classes that your student took to earn that GPA. And they value AP courses. So this could be for a kid who's reluctant to up the rigor, take a dual enrollment or an AP level course. This could maybe give them a confidence to give it a try. Again, don't put everything into a test though, right? I would have conversations and ask your students' teachers, do you think they're ready? This should be a family conversation. Don't just have your student go and pick their classes at school on their own and not have a conversation about it. I'm not saying don't let them choose. I'm saying have a conversation. You know, the college bound journey is a family journey, and my goal here is to equip and support all of you in your family. Okay, so that AP potential can be a fantastic tool for your students. Okay, so let's talk about those high scores, those national merit potential. And I know we have, not everybody is from Ohio, but there's 50 states. I couldn't put everybody on here, so I'm deviating towards Ohio. This can mean money. And as a mom who just wrote another check for tuition, and I've got 3 more checks to go, and I am completely finished paying for college. Woohoo! Time to celebrate. I can tell you, I want to be at the front of the line for any free money that's available. So the qualification score for national merit qualification is from the 11th grade PSAT, only 11th grade. So even if your student hits the score in 10th grade, it doesn't count. And they are not looking at that total score that we just talked about, but they're instead looking at what's called the selection index, which is on the second page of your score report. So you need to find the selection index number is what you're looking for. The past 5 years of Ohio National Merit semifinalists is 215 to 219 on that selection index. 2 years ago, it was 215. And this year for the class of 2023, it was 216. It went up a point, but it's been higher. So that's the first thing. Those of you who have juniors, you got your scores in December. They will not announce the National Merit semifinalist until the week after Labor Day. Or the Labor Day week. They will announce it. They will tell your school first, then you will find out whether you got it or not. So finalists are not announced until February. Now, a few years back, we had a student who, as a 10th grader, he got a 224. Okay, he lived in Ohio, got a 224, did fantastic. I said to the mom, kids don't test consistently the same. I would still do not a ton of test prep for him, but I would do a little bit of test prep for him going into his junior year PSAT. So that was my recommendation to her. And she said, with the 224, we just really feel like we've got it. So they skipped over. They said, thank you, but no thank you. We're not going to do the tutoring. Hey, no problem. It was a college counseling client of ours at LEAP. Uh, you know, these decisions are the family's decisions to make. I always say we're here to give good advice, not always popular advice. Sometimes you don't like what you hear, but we're here to give the good advice, but you have to make the decisions for your family. So she said, no, thank you. We continue to work with them on all the other things. No big deal. He ended up going down to a 212. He did not make qualification because he was out of practice and it was a different day and there were different factors involved. He then decided to go ahead and do ACT prep with us. And guess what? He got a perfect 36. So I really, in my gut, know that had he been in practice and fresh and ready for that PSAT in 11th grade, he would have hit it and been a national merit finalist eventually. I've only one time in my 24 years had known of a student who didn't get finalist, who was a semifinalist. That student, when he came to us and we were talking about, all the aspects of the student, he didn't have very good grades. He had below a 3.0. He was an artist. He was at the School for Creative and Performing Arts here in Cincinnati. And I said to his mom, we'll work with him, but he's probably not going to be a finalist with that GPA. So therefore, why don't you save your money? Don't work with us. Let's put it into other things because he won't make finalists because of his GPA. She said, I know he won't, but we just want to get semifinalists. So they still did the tutoring. He got the score to be a semifinalist. He did not make a finalist because of his grades. That is the only one. And we have about 10 to 15 national merit semifinalists that come out of our program every year. And he's the only one that didn't go on to become finalist. So that's saying that if you make semifinalist and you've got good grades, you're going to go on to finalist. So 10th grade families. I want you to check your selection index. If the selection index is 195 or higher, and we've been tracking this data, we did not do PSAT prep 24 years ago. We started doing it about 15 years ago. And so we've been tracking data for the last 15 years. And what we found is if a 10th grader has a selection index of 195 and higher, and recently we did have a 192, get it, and they do tutoring over the summer and they're well prepped going into their PSAT in October, they have a really good shot of making enough gain to hit that national merit finalist, the semifinalist qualifying. So that's what you want to look for, is what is that selection index? Would we refuse to work with somebody who their scores in the 180s? No, but again, my job is to give you guys good advice, not necessarily popular advice. And our data shows it's the students who have a starting score of 195 or higher. We also know students with a 195 to 210 or so who don't do prep, they aren't practiced. They aren't going in fresh and ready and strategized and practiced. Most of the time, they struggle to hit that selection index that they need. So now remember, this is a brave new world that we're heading into. So it makes me nervous to say to anybody like, hey, historically, we've seen students with a 195 or higher who put in the work able to get there. However, it's a brave new world. We don't know what this new test is going to be. I'm still going to give you the advice that we've leaned into. We know that the test questions are still going to be very similar, but the test format's going to be different. Now, I just talked about the high scores. You might be on here and going, yeah, but Lisa, but what about me? I'm really disappointed in our scores. Then, is it that your student's just better suited for the ACT like my oldest Trent was? Are they just a poor test taker? Or do they have academic gaps? Do they need academic assistance? I'm going to ask you to really inspect what you find with that so that you know what you're dealing with, okay? So that you can discover, and if you need to, if you've taken this PSAT and if particularly 10th grade parents, probably most of you 11th grade parents, you're already on our email list. I'm going to guess that your students already taken our diagnostic ACT or they've done test prep or taken an official ACT. But 10th grade parents, LEAP, we do give a diagnostic ACT. You can take it at home with a timed webinar experience, pencil to paper, or we do offer it. We're not offering it again until March right now, but pencil to paper in person in the Cincinnati area. We've got both available. You can do the on-demand one at any time. Just let me know, and Tracy can get you the link to sign up for that. But you really want to figure out, is it more because you're at ACT? But if you're not testing well on either, then you want to find out what those academic gaps are, and you want to get academic assistance. LEAP does offer tutoring in most subject areas, if that interests you, to support students in getting better grades. It's really important, not only for college admissions, but really for your student to be successful in the classroom when they get to college. So remember, here's how the two tests compare, PSAT and SAT. Whatever your score is on the PSAT, that's your expected score on the SAT. If you go to the LEAP website, we have this converter. You know what? I'm going to just like live action. I'm going to try to live action show it to you. Let me try that. Okay, here. So if we go over to the LEAP website, I just want to show you guys where you can find this. You go to ACT and SAT prep. This literally drags. So if your student got, 1210 on the PSAT, that is equal to a 25 on the ACT. And that's how you use this. So if your student had a 1210 PSAT, has an ACT of a 22 or a 23, they're an SAT kid. If your student got a 1210 on the PSAT, but they have a 28 on the ACT, they're an ACT kiddo. It's that simple. And colleges don't have a preference. Now, will that change for the class of 2025? I'm telling you, the new SAT, I've seen it. It makes me nervous. We don't know what to expect. So I think we're going to see more students leaning towards the ACT while we all figure out what this new SAT is. SAT, test prep agencies are greatly reliant on SAT to give us practice questions, and they haven't given us a whole lot yet. So I encourage you to use this converter, though, to make wise choices between the ACT and the SAT. So next steps. If your student needs to take an ACT or an SAT diagnostic, Tracy, this is Tracy's picture, Tracy in our office, she is more than happy to answer any questions you have and get you set up. If you want the on-demand version of that, you absolutely can do that. Really take the time to think about, should you be doing the ACT or the SAT, discuss it with your family. Get your test prep request in. Classes fill, tutoring fills, the early bird gets the worm when it comes to choices of times. And when it comes to course scheduling, I really encourage you guys to go ahead and listen to the podcast that I have coming up in a couple weeks on choosing the right classes, advice that we have. We have it for regular colleges, highly selective colleges, but lean into these AP potential reports that you have here. Talk to your classroom teacher. If your school has an academic fair where you can go in and talk, I encourage you to attend that, or maybe it's on a webinar, and make wise choices when it comes to choosing the classes. Because honestly, choosing the right classes is more important than almost anything else in your child's college application. Don't overcommit them to too much rigor, but you don't want to play it safe in all areas. Okay, so questions before I let you guys go. Let's see, Carrie wants to know, should 10th graders take the diagnostic ACT now, March, or wait till summer? Carrie, can you tell me in the question feature what math class your 10th grader is in right now? Is it geometry? Is it algebra 2? Those are the two typical ones. Do you guys hear my dog? My dog always likes to be in here with me, but heard my husband, so he's doing something. So Carrie, let me know if you know what math that is. If you're in, so families, if your student is in Algebra 2 as a 10th grader, so they're advanced in their math, then I would suggest that you either, if you want the in-person one, I think, and you're in the Cincinnati area, I think March is great. Okay, so Carrie's students in geometry going to take Algebra 2 next year. Carrie, you've got time. I'm going to encourage you guys, if you've not yet, to attend our ACT SAT 101. We give it a lot, and it's where I guide you through the 4 steps of maximizing ACT and SAT scores. So Carrie, because your students in geometry are going to take probably Algebra 2 next year, I would maybe take that diagnostic test over the summer. Let's concentrate on academics. Now, for those of you who have a 10th grader who's in Algebra 2, they could be ready to take the ACT as soon as June and the ACT or SAT as soon as June. The ACT and the SAT are both given during the summer, and sometimes it's a great time to test. I'm thinking of a family in nearby Mason High School who their twin boys tested in July after their sophomore year. They'd been taking Algebra 2, and the one student got a 35 and he never had to take the test again. So he never had to have like competing for time, academics, extracurriculars, the school year, and testing, right? So there can be a lot of ease in testing during the summer months. I'm a fan of it if your 10th grader will have completed Algebra 2. If your 10th grader has not completed Algebra 2, the earliest I want them to take an actual ACT or SAT would be December. And you could do your diagnostic in the summer or in the fall. So Carrie said, thank you. You are welcome, Carrie. Okay, Nancy, so good to see you. AP classes senior year. How do they come into play with college admissions consideration? Great question, Nancy. Okay, and Nancy's one of our longtime clients, so it's good to see you. And she's not in Cincinnati. So when your students are filling out your college applications, they're going to have to list all of the classes that they are taking their senior year. So that's for everybody. It doesn't matter if your student's applying to a non-selective or a highly selective school. The colleges will know what your student is scheduled to take for their senior year. Sorry, my glasses are like, these are just readers and they're killing my head today for some reason. So they will know what you're taking, and that is definitely factored in. Easy Street is not the way to go the senior year. Do not, we talk about this in the upcoming podcast on course scheduling. Do not take your foot off the gas in senior year to try to have ease. It will come back to bite you. It is not a good idea for selective or highly selective schools. So for schools that are admitting 50% or less of their students, or even 55% or less, they're really closely going to look at what your student's taking. So keep the rigor up. Now, for some of the schools are going to also tell your student that they have to send mid-year grades. So they have to submit their grades in January from the first semester. So not only is it going to matter what classes they took, the grades that they earned are also going to be in there. So I know this is one of those for students. This falls in the category of not a popular answer by Lisa, but it's the right answer. It's what we know to be true. So we got to talk about this as a family. Maybe listen to the podcast episode with Julie and me together where we discuss proper course selection. And I am sorry, Gunnar is normally like just chilling out next to me. Okay, Patrice, the school offers a PSAT or practice ACT. So Patrice, junior year, you're saying you're in October, you're gonna have the choice between PSAT or a practice ACT. If my 10th grader had a greater than 195 selection index this year on the PSAT as a 10th grader, Patrice, if I'm inserting anything incorrect, correct me, please. Is it better to prep and take the PSAT again in 11th grade or use a time to take a practice ACT in the fall of 11th grade? Okay, Patrice said, I'm getting all these details right. Very good. So Patrice, I want your now 10th grader who has a selection index over 195 to do test prep with us over the summer, maybe even into the fall a little bit, and then take the PSAT in October. We have plenty of opportunities for your student to take a free diagnostic ACT with us that would be equal to what your school is doing. Patrice, can you tell me in the comments what your school is? Nobody else sees it. I'm just curious. I think I might know what school it is, but just curious. So I want you to know that you've got plenty of opportunities to get ACT practice in. The PSAT is only one time, and because that's your one chance for really lucrative scholarships. And even if you build a college list that doesn't have those schools that give big money there, the upside is it's a feather in your cap. It's a resume builder. It's an award. So I would go for it with the PSAT. Okay. Yep, Patrice, that's exactly where I thought. And she's taking our diagnostic this Sunday. The other thing that we allow students to do too, you guys, is we have a program called ACT Perfect Practice, where you just at home, you take 5 different ACT tests with timed videos, our bubble sheets, you get the LEAP lens reports. It's a DIY. Very affordable, low priced, and it's a way to get lots of ACT practice for kids who don't necessarily need tutoring or a strategy class. Let me say something about that. If your kid most of them are not motivated to sit down and do the work, even if they're super smart, right? They're kids, they're teenagers, even those smart ones. And it takes a lot of discipline to do DIY. But perfect practice is designed to be DIY. We do realize that some students just want to be in practice. They want to be familiar with the test, but they don't really need strategies. They don't have any content gaps. We did not have the ACT Perfect Practice program on my smartest kid, Trent, and they all know that he's academically the smartest, and the other 2 are smarter in other ways. But I would have just had him really do a lot of that ACT Perfect Practice. So keep that in mind. So Patrice said is another. Patrice, I think that you're going to be fine on the ACT, so I don't think you're missing out. Nancy, you are welcome. Okay, Julie's the last question. So if anybody else has another question that they want to ask it before I let you guys go. How does Career Center for Business with college credits, Julie, I'm going to need a little help here. How does Career Center for Business with college credits factor into grades, ACT admissions? So can you help me with what Career Center for Business is? So are you saying like dual enrollment classes for business, getting college credits? How does that factor in? Yes. Okay. Very good. And if thank you for the yes. And if there are any other details I'm getting wrong, go ahead and jump in there and correct me in the comments. I want to make sure I'm getting this right for you. Okay. So it sounds like Julie's student has taken some dual enrollment. In Ohio, it's called CCP, College Credit Plus, for college credit while the student is in high school. How does that factor into grades? So if your student takes dual enrollment courses, Ohio families, CCP, those grades do go on the college transcript eventually. So I caution families, there's college ready, which means am I ready? And there's college capable. So college capable is I'm capable of doing college level work, right? College ready is, and I'm disciplined, I'm ready, I'm mature enough to handle it, right? This is what I really want you thinking about. They are not the same thing. I have had Eric Inlick on the podcast back in the fall, and we talked about college capable, college ready. He works with neurodivergent students, but I really think this idea of college capable, college ready matters. So whatever your student gets in those dual enrollment courses, that grade is going to carry onto the college transcript. It's also going to affect the high school GPA, and colleges like it for the rigor piece, but the grade's going to count. So you need to really drive that home with your student. The other thing is, we talk a lot, like we got a lot of high scorers on tonight, which congratulations, guys. But as I say that, that means you have some good merit scholarship opportunities, right? So as I share these details with you, when you get merit scholarships, your student has to keep a specific GPA at the college to be able for that to renew every semester. So these grades that they're pulling in dual enrollment courses can affect that. So have that conversation in the seriousness of pursuing dual enrollment with your teenager. Okay, so it's an admission advantage as far as like, yes, you're pursuing rigor, so that's a plus. If you're getting good grades in it, that's a plus. But if you get a poor grade, that's a minus. Okay. And Julie, you said also with ACT. So if you've got a follow up to that at all, let me know. So any other questions, everybody? It was really great to be on with you all. I know not everybody gets to take the PSAT. I'm glad that you guys were able to join us. For those of you that have upcoming state ACT and SAT test or other tests, what we've seen recently is if you're sitting on the fence about, we don't know if or when we're going to do test prep, our classes, we had to add 2 classes last week because we have classes that are filling up and closing, and the early bird gets the worm on the choice of time. So do not delay. Another thing, and I mentioned this to the students I was speaking to at Mason today when I was a guest speaker there. If your student is thinking about the July ACT, and like hands down for sure that they're going to take that July ACT, that is the test date with the fewest seats available nationally every year. So it is already available, these June and July summer test dates. If like, oh, we're going to do the state test and my kiddo is going to need one more test. Or 10th grade parents, I want my kid to take advantage of testing in the summer. We will have prep up and ready to go for those, but I want to remind you that every testing site has a limited number of seats, and that July, particularly the July one, lots of people get turned away if they don't register early. So, and remember, you need to do that registration over at act.org on your own. Your high school does not take care of that for you. So wonderful to be with you as always. Listen to the podcast. By the way, I am hosting a college list building challenge with my other company, Flourish. It starts next week. It's just $16, $4 a week. And I'm going to resource your family to have curated, healthy conversations to equip you to build the perfect college list. So I will be getting that out in the newsletters, but I hope that you guys will join me. Just shoot me an email if you want the link to join. Okay, take care, everybody. Night.